Episode 5. Whispers in the dust, the Nevada desert lay cloaked in the soft amber glow of late afternoon. The sun sinking toward the western horizon, its golden disk, casting long shadows that stretched across the endless sands like the fingers of a dying day. The air was still, heavy with the lingering heat of the midday furnace, though a faint breeze carried the whisper of cooler night air from the canyon they had left behind. A distant memory of refuge turned battlefield. The canyon's towering walls, their amber hues fading into the haze, receded into the distance, their jagged edges softened by the distance, while the vast expanse ahead promised both sanctuary and peril, a canvas of gold and shadow that stretched to the horizon. The sand beneath their feet shimmered with the day's heat, each grain reflecting the fading light, creating a mosaic of warmth that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of their steps. Jacob Kane walked at the head of the group, his boots crunching against the ground, the sound a steady cadence against the silence, a heartbeat in the vast emptiness. His silver-streaked black hair was matted with sweat and dust, clinging to his weathered face where scars traced the map of a life hard-lived. Each line a story of survival etched into his skin, his shoulder grazed by a bullet in the gulch fight 2 days prior, and nicked again in the canyon ambush. Throbbed beneath his worn cotton shirt, the fabric stained with the day's exertion sweat, dust, and the faint smear of blood from a fresh graze. The pain was a dull ache, a constant companion that pulsed with every movement. But his Winchester rifle remained a steadfast presence at his side, its polished barrel cool to the touch despite the heat, its weight a grounding force in the chaos. Of their flight, Nita moved beside him, her limping gait steadier now than it had been in the canyon. The bandage on her leg a stark white against the tattered red and brown of her traditional Navajo dress. The cloth, tied with care by Jacob's hands the night before as they rested beneath a rocky overhang, held firm, though the strain of their journey showed in the tightness around her dark eyes. The faint lines of exhaustion etched into her youthful face. Those eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned the horizon with a mix of determination and unease, reflecting the fading sunlight like twin pools of obsidian, her hand resting lightly on the sheathed dagger at her waist, its hilt worn smooth. By her grip, a comfort in the uncertainty that lay ahead. The ledger, the rolled parchment that held the damning evidence of Ward's crimes and the tycoon's complicity. Harrington, Voss, Caldwell, names that whispered of power and blood, was now tucked safely within the folds of her dress, its weight a constant reminder of their mission, a burden she carried with the grace of a warrior. Behind them, the Navajo women followed with a quiet resilience that spoke of their unbreakable spirit. Shima led the group, her silver hair catching the fading light like a beacon, each strand a thread of moonlight woven into the tapestry of her being, a testament to the years she had endured. Her small bow, its wood darkened by years of use and polished by the oils of her hands, was slung over her shoulder, the string taut with the promise of defense. A silent guardian in the gathering dusk, her face etched with the wisdom of decades, carried a calm that belied the tension in her grip on the bow, her fingers resting lightly on the fletching of an arrow, ready to draw at a moment's notice. Owe trailed close to Shima, her arms cradling her newborn with a tenderness that belied the harshness of their surroundings. The child's soft coos, a fragile thread of life amid the desert's vast silence. The baby's tiny face, nestled against her chest, was peaceful, its eyes closed in a slumber that seemed a miracle amid the danger they fled. Its breath a gentle rise and fall that mirrored the rhythm of her steps. Tala and Kiona flanked the group, their daggers sheathed, but their postures alert. Their movements a dance of vigilance across the shifting sands, their lithe forms cutting through the air like shadows cast by the setting sun. The scout, still, bound with a leather strap around his wrists, stumbled at the rear, his face gaunt with exhaustion and fear, his earlier bravado replaced by the hollow stare of a man facing his end, leaving uneven tracks that marked their path like a trail of despair. "We need shelter before nightfall," Jacob said, his voice rough with the dust that coated his parched throat. The words scraping against his lips like sandpaper, a rasp that carried the weight of their journey. He paused, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. the gesture revealing the tension in his shoulders, the rifle shifting slightly in his grip. The canyon's too exposed, and those riders won't stop, with the ledger in our hands. Nita nodded, her gaze settling on a distant rise where a cluster of jagged rocks promised cover, their dark silhouettes stark against the amber sky. "There's an old trading post beyond those stones," she replied. Her tone measured a calm facade over the storm of her thoughts. "Abandoned, but it has walls thick enough to hold if we reinforce them." Lila knows the way she scouted. Years ago, when we hid from Ward's scouts, Leela, walking beside her sister, adjusted the ledger within the folds of her dress, her young face taut with the burden of memory. The parchment's edges crinkling softly against her skin. "It's hidden by a dry creek bed," she added, her voice soft but firm, a thread of steel beneath the gentleness. "The entrance is narrow, overgrown with brush, see to miss, unless you know where to look. We can hold there if they find us, at least until we plan our next move." The group altered their course, the rise growing larger as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple that bled into the horizon, a canvas of nature's farewell. The air cooled with the breeze, carrying the faint scent of sage and the promise of dusk, a whisper of relief amid the heat. As they neared the rocks, a sudden rustle broke the silence, shadow darting among the stones, a flicker of movement that sent a jolt through Jacob's nerves. He raised his rifle, the stock pressing against his shoulder, his finger hovering over the trigger, the metal cool against his skin, his green eyes narrowing as he tracked the sound. But Nita's hand on his arm stilled him, her touch firm yet gentle, a silent command that grounded him in the moment. "Wait," she whispered, her voice a breath against the wind, her eyes narrowing as she peered into the shadows. A figure emerged, a wiry man with sun-bleached hair and a patched coat that hung loosely on his frame, the fabric faded by the sun and frayed at the edges. His hands were raised in peace, palms outward, the gesture deliberate, his fingers calloused and stained with the dirt of the desert. "I'm no threat," he called, his voice raspy, a dry croak that carried the weight of days without water. "Name's Eli. I've been watching the riders, 10, maybe 12, closing from the east. I've been tracking them since they passed my old homestead 2 days back." Jacob lowered his rifle slightly, the barrel dipping, but not resting, his gaze assessing the stranger with a hunter's precision, taking in the lines of fatigue on his face, the wary set of his shoulders. "Why help us?" he asked, his voice a low growl, the suspicion thick in his tone, a shield against the unknown. Eli shrugged, a wry smile tugging at his cracked lips, the gesture revealing a gap where a tooth had been lost to time or violence. "Saw what you did to Ward's men back in the gulch, heard the flood took him down. Figured you're fighting the same devils I am. Railroads taken my land too, burned my barn, and drove off my cattle. I've got no love for Harrington's dogs." Nita exchanged a glance with Jacob, a silent agreement passing between them, a flicker of trust born of shared enemies. Her hand lingered on his arm a moment longer, the warmth of her touch seeping through his sleeve, before she turned to Eli. "Lead us to the post," she said, her tone measured, a leader's command softened by gratitude. "We'll talk there once. We're safe." Eli nodded, his eyes meeting hers with a nod of respect. And he turned, guiding them through the jagged rocks with a shoe-footedness that spoke of familiarity. The path descended into a dry creek bed, its banks eroded by time, the sand packed. Hard beneath their feet, a natural trench that hid them from the open desert. The trading post came into view, a weathered adobe structure, its walls cracked but standing, the mud bricks pocked with the scars of weather and neglect. The roof sagged under the weight of time, its wooden beams exposed and splintered, but the walls promised shelter, a fortress in the wilderness. The group entered, the interior cool and dim, the scent of old wood and dust filling the air, a musty aroma that mingled with the faint trace of leather and gun oil. They barricaded the door with a heavy wooden table, its legs scraping against the floor with a groan. The scout tied to a post in the corner, his eyes darting with renewed fear as the ropes bit into his wrists. Lila unrolled the ledger, spreading it on a rickety table that wobbled under the weight, the parchment crackling softly as she smoothed it out. The fading light filtered through a cracked window, casting a golden glow across the faded ink, illuminating the names and dates with a reverence that belied their danger. Harrington Voss, Caldwell, she read, her finger tracing the lines, her voice steady, despite the tremble in her hands. Payments for land clears. Dates of attacks our villages here, dated 3 years back, the night father died. There's a list of supplies, 2 gunpowder, rifles shipped, from Carson City. Jacob leaned in, his jaw tightening, the names. Igniting a fire in his chest, a rage born of the memories, they evoked Clara's scream as flames consumed their home, Lily's small hand slipping from his. Proof enough to hang them, he said, his voice a low rumble, the words heavy with the weight of justice. But we need to get it east, to a judge who'll listen, someone beyond their reach in Virginia City. A sudden crash interrupted. The sound of hoofbeats and shouts piercing the stillness outside, a thunder that shook the fragile walls. The riders had found them, their pursuit relentless, driven by the tycoon's greed. Jacob motioned to the windows, assigning positions with a series of sharp gestures, his voice a command cut short by the urgency. Shima took a vantage point, near a shattered window, her bow ready. The arrow knocked with a precision that spoke of years of practice, her silver hair catching the light. Tala and Kiona flanked the door, their daggers drawn, the blades glinting with a cold promise as they braced for the assault. Nita stood with Jacob, her dagger in hand, the ledger tucked safely within her dress. Her stance a blend of defiance and readiness. Eli grabbed a rusty shotgun from a corner, the metal pitted but functional, a grim determination settling into his gaunt features as he checked the load. The first rider charged, firing a shot that splintered the adobe with a sharp crack, the bullet embedding itself in the wall above Shima's head, sending a shower of dust into the air. Shima's arrow flew in response, striking the rider's arm with a soft thud, the fletching quivering as he recoiled, forcing him to retreat with a cry. Tala and Kiona burst out, their daggers flashing in the dim light, a blur of motion as they took down 2 more riders in a synchronized dance of steel and sand, their blades finding flesh with a precision that left no room for mercy. Jacob fired through a window, his shot dropping a rider with a clean hit to the chest. The man slumping from his saddle, but the numbers pressed on, a tide of violence that threatened to overwhelm their fragile stand. A bullet grazed Nita's shoulder, a hot sting that drew a gasp from her lips. Her hand clutching the wound as blood seeped through her fingers, a crimson stain against the white bandage. Jacob pulled her back, his heart pounding with a fear he hadn't known since losing his family, his arm wrapping around her as he dragged her behind a crate, his breath ragged with the effort. "We can't hold forever," he said, his voice tight, the words a confession of their limits, his eyes locked on hers, searching for strength. "We need a diversion, something to buy us time." Eli nodded, his eyes meeting Jacob's with a resolve born of shared loss. "There's a back tunnel used by smugglers years ago," he said, his voice steady despite the gunfire outside. "It leads to the creek bed, about 100 yards north. I'll draw them off. Give you a head start." Before Jacob could protest, Eli slipped out through a side door, firing his shotgun with a booming roar that scattered the riders, the pellets kicking up sand and forcing a retreat. The group seized the moment, fleeing through the tunnel, damp walls closing in around them, the air thick with the scent of mold and earth. The passage was narrow, the ceiling low, forcing them to stoop, their breaths echoing in the confined space, a symphony of survival. Nita leaned on Jacob, her warmth against him a lifeline, their hands brushing as they navigated the dark. Her fingers trembling but finding his, a silent anchor in the chaos. The tunnel opened to the creek bed and they emerged under a starlit sky, cool night air a balm against their heated skin. The riders' shouts fading into the distance as Eli's diversion held. They collapsed by the water's edge, breathless. The creek, a silver ribbon under the stars, its gentle flow a contrast to the violence they'd escaped. Nita's hand found Jacob's, her grip weak but firm, her fingers interlacing with his, a connection that steadied them both. "We're alive," she murmured, her eyes meeting his, a spark igniting in the silence, a flame that flickered with hope and something deeper. "For now," Jacob replied, his voice soft, the roughness smoothed by the emotion that swelled in his chest, the connection between them deepening with each shared breath. He looked at her, the starlight catching the lines of her face, tracing the curve of her cheek with a tenderness he hadn't felt in years, and felt a pula bond that transcended the battle, a promise of something yet to come, a light in the darkness of his soul.
Ow.
But the fight's far from over. Episode 5 end. Flames of Hope. Episode 5 sees Jacob and Nita find temporary refuge in the trading post. The ledger draws relentless pursuit from the tycoon's riders. Who is Eli, and can their burgeoning love withstand the growing danger?
Tune.
And for episode 6, to uncover the tycoon's next move, if you're captivated by this saga, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to catch every thrilling moment. Share your thoughts on Eli's sacrifice in the comments below.